Hello, hello, back again. Final week of lecture, and it's just going to be your big assignments due next week, your signature assignment. So today's again going to be short and brief, but basically just kind of helping you summarize the articles that you will be reading today or this week. And so today is going to be Ethics, Evidence, and Real Families, SPED 266. So let's jump into it. Today is going to be where everything comes together: your beliefs, the research, the law, and your actual behavior with the families. The reality is families remember how you treat them. All right. They're not going to remember the IEP. They're not going to remember the specific meeting or what you were wearing, right? They're going to remember how you made them feel. It's not your lesson plans that you designed. It's not your paperwork that you did, but how you made them feel and how you made their child feel. Families will forget the data charts. They will not forget whether you respected them or you made them feel dismissed. So two main anchors that were in the readings were ethics and evidence, right? You don't get to rely on vibes when you're in a meeting, right? You don't get to revive like, hey, I'm a cool person. This is going to be great. Your decisions must be grounded in both ethics and research. So let's start with ethics. The code of ethics is not a suggestion, number one. It is your professional compass when things get messy. And I promise you, they will. You're in special education. Every day is messy, right? Your ethics are going to constantly be tested, and it is your job to follow your professional compass and do the right thing every time. If it's not obvious what to do, it's not an ethical dilemma. Ethics show up when two right things are conflicting. I don't know which is better here. I don't know what to do here. That's the ethical dilemma that we need to focus on. And professionals must always maintain dignity of the individual, right? Not only of the student, but of the parents as well, or the family members or guardians. You have to respect families, all right? We might not necessarily agree with everything they're doing or everything they're saying, but we need to respect their place in that child's life. You have to advocate for your students, right? Not just for what you do with them or for them, but what else they could receive from the outside. Could they get OT services? Could they get PT? Do they need speech? You need to be their advocate. Does the family need more resources? Could you put them in touch with social services so that they get more food stamps, or that maybe they need some mental health support, or they don't have a primary care doctor and they don't have insurance? Could you help guide them in that pathway, right? You need to advocate not just for the students, but for the entire family as well, because what's best for the student is what's best for the family. And you always must practice this with integrity, right? It's the number one lying thing to consider is your integrity through this. An example of the ethical dilemmas that I mentioned is the family preference versus school policy. That's a common ethical dilemma that pops up for teachers, especially special education teachers. Another one is students' need versus our available resources, right? What's best for the student? What's the best that we can provide? Sometimes that's an ethical dilemma that we have to be able to break down for ourselves to get through. Confidentiality versus collaboration. It might be best for me to disclose a bunch of things to another teacher, but do I have the right to do that? Will it be breaking the law, right? But is it what's best, right? We have to battle with what's right versus what's best a lot. That's that ethical dilemma. And you're going to live in this place for the majority of your educational life, right? The longer you teach, the longer this is going to be an issue. You'll get better at dealing with the ethical dilemma, but it's going to be a constant pop-up in your day-to-day. And the question that you need to develop in yourself is, do you have a framework and a guide for handling these ethical dilemmas? Or are you just winging it and guessing, right? So you need to, as a teacher, create a framework for your decision making and how you're going to make these decisions, right? I always like to use the example. When I was early on in my teaching, it was really like, don't hug your students, don't hug your students, don't. And I was like, sometimes my students just need a hug. That was an ethical dilemma for me. Like, I know I might get in trouble for this, but I know it's what the child needs. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to give hugs. It's never come back to bite me in the butt. Thank goodness. That was a huge ethical dilemma. It was just kind of the time and the environment at the time was very hands-off. There was a lot of things happening and whatever. But sometimes your kids just need a hug. And I was like, if I go down because I gave a kid a hug, I'm going to go down because I gave a kid a hug. So just, again, those things that pop up that you don't necessarily think are going to pop up in your teaching experiences might. So just have a framework and what you're do's and don'ts are and what your boundaries are so that you can make the best informed decision when these dilemmas pop up. So when challenges arise, like I said, you need to have a strong partnership and a strong framework for how this is going to go down, right? Collaboration, mutual respect, shared decision making. When you have a question, you need to have somebody that you can go talk to about it. The research is clear that partnership is not one directional, right? It's not we tell families what to do, it's that shared power, that shared consensus. So, the best thing to do when a challenge does occur is sit down, collaborate, have a conversation, and figure out what the best way to move forward is. And there is a huge gap between what research says and what we actually do, right? There's actually not a lot of research on how to involve parents. It just says you should involve parents and it's better off when we do. But there is definitely a disconnect between the actual practice of family engagement. And so the research says inform the parents, right? But not how to. And so it's the teacher's responsibility to take a step back, take a deep breath, and figure out how are you individually going to create a better family relationship with your students' families? What is that going to look like for each individual student? What's that going to look like as a whole? And so the whole point of this class is for you to really get your hands muddy on how you're going to engage your families and how you're going to develop relationships. What's your philosophy for family relationships? How do you make it attainable for all parents? What's your best practices, right? These are the things that you're going to focus on so that your parents know day one exactly who their teacher is and who they're going to be working with to help make sure that their student and child are successful. So we are shifting, right? We're shifting from research to actual practice and creating that professional shift, right? You are moving from being a student to now being a professional and now being a collaborative professional. And professionals justify their decision, ground their actions in ethics, and they think about their impact, right? That's what you need to be doing here, is you need to be aware of how your actions affect parents, affect students, and how you can create a amazing working relationship with these people to better offer an educational experience for the student, right? So final takeaways. Your assignment this week is not about being perfect. It's about being intentional, right? You're going to make mistakes. Things are going to happen. Things are going to be taken out of context. It's not what you wanted, right? But the point is, are you intentional with what you're doing? And are you willing to adapt and change as needed? Families don't need a perfect teacher. They don't. They need teachers who are thoughtful, ethical, and willing to listen. That's all you need to do. Partnership is not something you say you value. It's something families can feel when they work with you. You're right. Right? It's not saying, oh, I do this and I do this assessment and blah, 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 blah. I do all of these things. I'm great. It's, do they feel like you're actually doing what's best for their child? Right? They need to feel that, not just hear it, that you are doing it. They need to see it. They need to acknowledge, or they need to not acknowledge, they need to understand and fully feel like you have got their child's back. Short and sweet, like I said this week. Really focus on intentionality this week. All right. Really focus on what you would like to see your child's teacher do, right? I think sometimes we get caught up in the cross my T's, dot my I's, and we forget that we're dealing with humans here. Humans that have a lot at stake in this relationship. Their child is the key thing that needs to be taken care of here, right? So what we need to do to make them feel relaxed and confident in your abilities is what the focus is. So remember, if you're not a parent, think about your parents. Think about your friends' kids. What do you want for them? And that's how you need to engage with these families. They're your own. And when we do that, we're going to see a lot more success because the majority of teaching is not about the science lesson or the math lesson. It's about how you made the student feel and how you made the parents feel. And that will take you a very long way. As I said, I think in week 1, the number one predictor of graduation is the relationships with teachers, right? The number one connection to graduation rates for students is the teacher. And so when we can formulate amazing relationships with our students and our parents, we are setting them up for complete success later on in their education and later on in their life. So thank you so much. Have a good one.